Hello, my friends, and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Well, there's stages in conflict and misunderstandings or, debates. The first one is there's a problem. We figure things out. Hey, there's a problem somewhere. Okay, now we have two options. We want to solve it or we don't want to solve it. If we want to solve it, we have to meet and discuss it, talk about it. If we don't want to solve it, we don't talk and we'll see where it gets us. And if it doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't go anywhere. But usually that escalates. And when it escalates, it gets us in a deeper shit. And again, we're going to always have this. Solve it or not solve it. Solve it, not solve it. And if we just push the shit like a snowball, gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's going to be harder to stop it or dissipate it later. So then you decide to talk. That's the first step in solving a problem. If there is a problem, let's say it is a problem, talking. Now you don't have to agree, but without talking, without negotiating, talking first. Like, hey, how are you? I don't like you. I don't like you either. Okay, it's still better than not talking. And then you want to talk? Yeah, okay. Again, it's better. And then you meet and you discuss and then you negotiate. When you agree, okay, we can find a middle ground here, but we need to negotiate. And then you solve the problem. Maybe. Let's say this is the best scenario. And when you solve the problem and you put your signature on the paper, on the treaty, or whatever the problem is, that means you agreed with the terms. The other person agreed with the terms. Given that there's no influences from outside. Okay? So then that means shut the hell up. Problem solved. I don't want to see you tomorrow coming with a piece of paper. I don't want it. I don't like it. I mean, that's childish behavior. Things can change. It's true. Again, you start over. Let's discuss it. Let's talk about it. And so on. Some people remain unresolved. Some people reach a point where you get into a fist fight or wars or other garbage. So what do we have here? We have France, the country of France. The country of France, let's put it in a context. It's much smaller in terms of number, in terms of, I think, economy as well. I think in terms of military power, resources than Russia. So however you look at it, it's weaker. I mean, yeah, I know the French are the best. Each country is the best in its own eyes, okay? But let's put in the context. 60-some million people versus 145 million people. 7,000 warheads, nuclear warheads, these guys have about 200, 300, 400, so in the hundreds. But you don't need more if you know where to do it, right? Now, economy. I think Russia right now is the fifth economy or fourth economy. France is below, it's not over. But you can say, well, it's more productive. Yeah, it's more productive for now. I mean, socialism sometimes works for a while. Okay, now what do we have? Not France, I should make a distinction, but I think you guys know the distinction between France, French nation, and the guys who are in charge of France. I'm talking about the French weasels in charge of your country, which are Macron and two foreign minister and prime minister and Mr. Le Cornu. I think these guys, except Macron, are very flimsy and they will harm your country. Now they want to somehow take the route to challenge Russia on its own. Remember, these guys could ask you at one point to fight Russia actively, and then it's going to be too late for you. The snow ball is already too big at that point for you to dissipate it or to stop it from rolling and getting bigger. What do we have here? We have an imbecile. Imbecile is not an imbecile. I think he's just a person who doesn't work for French interest. That's my assessment. And I will tell you, this is the French foreign minister, the new appointed French foreign minister, who was the boyfriend of the current prime minister. They were boyfriends, and nothing wrong with that. But don't you think that in a government, when you have this kind of formal relations, it's not healthy? I mean, let's say I'm the president of the United States of America and my ex-girlfriend or wife is the vice president, or she's the FBI, and then my ex, I don't know, something is my CIA boss. Don't you think that people might have questions? Hey, maybe this guy, there's a problem. Like some businesses do not allow, especially the government doesn't allow to have related people working in the same departments. Let's put it this way. Husband and wife, or son and daughter, even though that's everywhere. But nevertheless, they have this kind of policies for one reason. Why is that? Well, I'll let you figure it out. Now, and I know you already know why. So we have here, friends, this guy, the French foreign minister, saying that, and I'm going to show you, it is no longer in our interest to talk to Russian officials. French foreign minister. Now, look at this. In our interest. Who exactly is us in our? Is it France's interest? Is it the French nation? Is the weasels who control France? All of the above, some of... Okay? So this is the guy who says, we're not going to talk to you. We have no interest in talking to you. Okay. Let me give you a situation, a wake-up call. France is involved in a war against Russia as we speak. Why? Provides weapons to an enemy of Russia, that they are at war. Therefore, those guys will kill Russians. You are involved 100%. By my book. And I think by your book as well. I'm going to give you an example if you have problems agreeing with that. You fight the neighbor. Let's say the neighbor attacked you. Or you attacked the neighbor, but let's put it that you're the good guy here. And the neighbor attacked you. And you fight the neighbor, and you're about to, with your family, with your children, with your brothers, all the family, fight the neighbor with his family. And all of a sudden, another neighbor, which is friends, has nothing to do with you or with that guy, it's just another neighbor, gives your neighbor that attacked you, because you're the good guy, weapons that will, kill your members of your family. And they will give them information and tell them where to hit. And you are starting to, hey, wait a minute. My son was blown up by those guys with the weapons provided by that neighbor. Would you consider that neighbor, friends, involved? I fucking guarantee you, you would. So, okay, France is involved. NATO is involved. They say not. Like I say, I'm not a human being. I'm a, fucking pair of glasses. I identify as one. Reality is different. Nevertheless, so these guys are involved, friends, and they talk about sending troops over there, which I think they already have over there. But nevertheless, they talk about sending troops. Again, but they're still not involved. For you, do you think that if the neighbor sends his brothers in the neighbors that you're really fighting in his army to fight you, or, to protect the borders, are still not involved by your book, in your book? I think they're still involved. More involved, but they crossed the line of involvement and non-involvement. So these guys actually are fighting the Russians, and they say it's no longer in our interest to talk to Russian officials. The Russian officials threaten them, say, guys, we're going to pick you up if you were involved in the Crocus attack. The cooperation between the two countries in the terrorist sphere ceased because of the French. And now these guys say, we're not going to talk to you, but we might send troops over there. And the Russian says, we're going to blow up your armies over there. And France will have problems. Now, what would you do? I don't want to talk to you. I dare you. Isn't that what this imbecile? He dares Russia with you. You are his leverage. You are his energy. He threatens the Russians with you, not with him. This guy right here, he's not going to die in a war with Russia. He's not going to be affected. You are going to be affected. You. Too. All right, let's move on. French Foreign Minister Stéphane Séjourne, or Séjourne, I don't know, said that it is no longer in Paris's interest to hold discussions with Russia's representatives because Moscow distorts the content of such talks. But France does not, right? Correct. Really? Okay, let's move on. Séjourné, I don't know if that's how you call it, I don't care, that's why I call it, and I'm a free person, free man, said that it's not in our friends' interest to hold discussions with Russian officials because the communiques that are published and the reports that are made by them are full of lies. Really? Really? These guys? Okay, well, he says he suggested that in order to resume dialogue with Moscow, and I'm quoting, perhaps trust, remember the word trust, keyword, needs to be established first. And perhaps above all, we need to see developments on the military front in Ukraine so the relations can be restored. So far, this is not the case. So he says that trust must be established. All right, let me remind this 38-year-old weasel about trust. Hey, Séjourné, do you remember that you/your country was a signatory of the how do you call it, the accords, the Minsk Accord, Minsk agreements? Are you aware of that? And your country, when it's signed over there by Mr. Hollande, if I remember correctly, he said that he is going to be the guarantor that Ukraine will follow what's stipulated in the Minsk agreements. Do you remember that? Okay, if you don't, fuck off, I tell you. So, France and Germany acted as guarantor. That means trust. Trust. So the Russians, those bad guys that now you're talking, they distort everything, they believed you that you are going to act in good faith and you're gonna be the guarantor. What did you do? Nothing. So you fucked up the Russians. You were not, what's the name? Trust. You destroyed Russian trust. Why? Because you remember Mr. Hollande in an interview with those, whatever their names are, Bentley and whatever, he said that we had no intention to implement what we signed. A legal document that went to the United Nations. That's international. That's legal. So he said we didn't have any. We just bought time for the Ukrainians to arm themselves for the Russians, against the Russians. So the Russians were trying to solve a problem in Ukraine. You said, yeah, we're going to help you, and then you lied. So you tell me about the trust? Fuck off. That's the first one. That's the first one, Mr. Le journée, la papa. Is that a fact? Remember, even Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, which also was a signatory of that and a guarantor, did the same thing in an interview. We didn't have any intentions. That means they lied. So who lied first? No, probably the Russian lied, if you guys can think of, but before, let's say, 2014, 2015. You tell me, because that's when the Minsk agreements occurred. So Lesher says the same as almost always. The entities with the biggest crimes or with more crimes point their fingers and they're lecturing others about the same crimes these guys committed 50 times more. But hey, we somehow we are the lecturers here. Like the Americans on the nuclear weapons of Iran and North Korea, when the Americans are the only country that dropped 2 atomic bombs. And they wouldn't have stopped if the Japanese would not have surrendered unconditionally. That was the thing. They told the Japanese, right? The Truman, the president, we are going to bomb. That's what he said. All your cities, one after another, with the atomic bombs, until you unconditionally surrender. So they started with Hiroshima, 6th of August, 1945. The Japanese did not. There was a war crime. They were civilian. That was a city. Then they went to Nagasaki, the 9th of August, 1945. They didn't, and they did. Next one would have been Yokohama. So that's a crime anticipated. Not only anticipated, it's just pre-planned, premeditated, spoken. And they are lecturing Iran and everybody else on this planet because we know better. It's like every rapist being a judge now. The rapist who was never charged, he was never charged or convicted, but we know that he is the one. But he's, because I know best how to, I'm going to be the judge here. Can you imagine that? What a pedo. So the same with this guy. First, perhaps trust. Indeed, you have to make the first steps. And remember, the Russians did not attack you. You inserted yourself in the Ukraine equation. And it says here, we need to see developments on the military front in Ukraine so that relations can be restored. You know what it is? He, as a principal, as a CEO of a company, tells weasels in the company or in the school, like students, until you change your behavior, I will not talk to you because I'm in charge of you. Wake up. Wake up. That guy. So he is telling the Russians, Russia, that until you change your behavior, we're not going to talk to you, because this is a narcissistic trend, isn't it? Trait, is it? One of them, and it's a big one. So far, it says, this is not the case. Oh my God. It says, the long tradition of cooperation with Russia in the fight against terrorism is now at a standstill. Why is that? Because the Russians said to you, I hope that your services, special services, were not involved in Moscow Crocus attack. That's what Shoigu told Le Cornu, the defense minister of France. I hope, in the conversation when Le Cornu called him, he said, I hope that you are not involved. And this guy said, well, we're not going to talk to you anymore. Why is that? I tell you why that could be. Like, for instance, I don't know if it happened to you. It never happened to me because I never allowed it to happen. But maybe you hear these kind of things. You know what? I'm not going to talk. Boyfriend or wives and husbands, whatever, relationship. And let's take the example of her or he. It can be the same. Let's say she leaves. I'm going to my mom's. Okay. I need some time off. I need some. We have a fight, a strong, big fight. So she goes to her mom. And she stays over there, I don't know, a week, 2 or 3, a month. And after that, you mend fences by communicating. And then she comes back, or he comes back, and you find out that in that month, she fucked with someone. Or someone's. Ex this, or ex that, or new boyfriends. And you talk to her. Hey, what's that all about? Her justification. We were not talking at that time. We are not in any relations. So that will be her or his justification. This is what France does right now. I think right now France runs away from the terrorist cooperation. So when the Russians will bring that, say, we're not talking to you. We're not discussing that. We're not in talking. How do you call it? Relations right now. We're not in talking terms right now. I mean, this is weasel behavior. If you want to solve a problem, so what do you think is going to happen? That means when the French will send troops in Ukraine, the Russians will destroy them. Probably the Russians will create something in France. This guy will try to hit Russia, and there would be a little splendid war. Do you think so? Is it possible? I think it's very possible. And again, this séjourne or séjourné will use your children's energy, your children's work, taxes, and will send you wherever. And then we're going to say, defend France against the Russian hordes. We told you. Yeah, but you channeled all these things towards this direction. This is just France acts. I'm sorry to say that. I think that's a fact. France had its top of, the biggest development during Napoleon. That's when France really, and before, I have to say, before, if you want to take France before. But, was a power, strength. Now, what France is, as I mentioned many times before, is like a former heavyweight champion of the world who is about 68 years old, or maybe 72. And he thinks he still has it. And they challenge someone who's obviously a little bit younger, a little bit stronger, and is still there at a contender for the belt, for the World Championship. Why? Because Russia is there with United States of America. France and Great Britain are 5th, 7th, 8th places. I mean, but not that there are the others in between. The distance between these two, United States of America and Russia, compared with the rest of the world, the gap, maybe not China, let's put China over there, but still, it's so big, great, that these guys don't understand. They don't understand. So they still think they have it. You don't. The problem is they know that if they're going to be attacked by the Russians, then the whole hell broke loose. So again, it's not in France as a country, in our interest, to talk to Russian officials. So how are you going to solve the problems? You narcissistic bitch. Or you don't want it. The same with Ukraine. They didn't want to solve the problem in Ukraine. Therefore, these guys unprovoked attacked Ukraine. That's how the narrative is spoken to the baboons. But you and I, we're not baboons. Are we? We're not. All right, this is it, my friends. This is it. These guys are doing the right moves to get a conflict going, and the wrong move to solve a problem. The same with Ukraine. Those guys did all the bad moves to solve the problem between Russia and NATO in Ukraine, and all the right things to get the war started. The same as George W. Bush when he invaded those countries. He did the wrong thing for us, I think, but the right thing for his. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.